If I ever see your disgusting face again, I promise I will be the last thing you ever see. Wherever you are and whatever you are doing these days, you had better hope we will never meet again. Sent to the man who was once an acquaintance of my father. If you hear this story. This is my own story, what I went through in the darkest past, and I hope this story will be a warning and help you picture the harsh reality happening in the heart of Texas, the Lone Star State we still take pride in. This is the place where I tell the stories. You have never heard the stories. No one is clear-minded enough to tell truthfully. Do you know how it would be if the modern and flashy streets of Houston or Austin that you think are paradise are in fact slowly turning into a lawless abyss? A place where people freely trade their bodies in broad daylight without caring about those around them, where intoxicating substances spread like a desperate escape, and where chaos happens everywhere. This is not a nightmare in a movie, but the brutal reality that I, along with thousands of Texas residents, have had to fight to survive in the center of this state. In Houston and Austin, sidewalks have become battlefields, makeshift shelters for broken dreams. Physical intimacy in public happens without shame, and to stay alive, human dignity no longer matters. Life here is truly hell on earth. But that is also what I went through during the 6 darkest years of my life. Listen to this whole story, and you will go deeper into the homelessness crisis in Texas to know the bare truth never fully verified about life on the streets, and judge for yourself whether you can accept this reality. Stay with me, everything has only just begun. And do not forget to support me by subscribing to the channel and sharing this content with everyone. Leave your comment below your own story or the reason why you almost became homeless. Let us encourage one another for a better life in Texas. I am Emily, now 24 years old, living in Houston, Texas. I am a volunteer at a local homeless support organization where I share my experience to help people who are lost like I was before. But back then, I was just an 18-year-old girl, broken, afraid, and invisible in the busy streets of this state. I ran away from my family in a small Texas town, carrying trauma from being raped at 15, along with other abuses throughout childhood. Those memories were like wounds that would not heal, always reminding me of a painful childhood. I was born into a family where my father was addicted to alcohol, and my mother was indifferent to everything. I was beaten for small reasons and cursed like someone without worth. At 15, it happened with an acquaintance of my father, a pain I cannot fully tell, only that it destroyed my trust in people. I ran away from home, but that darkness followed me, pushing me into the spiral of drugs and homelessness in the very place where I was born, Texas. Imagine a street in Texas, where sunlight shines on cracked sidewalks, and the air is thick with the sound of survival. People crowd into temporary shelters. I and everyone else had to endure life without material things, food, drinks, and sometimes the fear of sudden illness. Some people had sex openly. Others were lost in the haze of drugs. I had to fight to make it through another day. I was young, naive, afraid, hurt, and alone. One thing you learn very quickly when you are homeless in Texas is that people treat you like inferior beings. I was criminally charged for the first time at 18 for sleeping in a public park in downtown Houston. They woke me in the middle of the night, flashlights glaring in my face. "Move along, you cannot stay here." I had nowhere else to go, yet they still drove me away like a stray dog. People turned away when I walked by. Try to imagine. You are starving, your throat is dry, but you are not allowed to use a restroom anywhere. Once at a fast food restaurant, I asked to use the restroom. The staff shook their head. For customers only. But another person who looked more decent was allowed. People shouted and spoke with contempt. "Filthy." Or, "Why do you not find a job?" It was so discouraging. I felt like a ghost, invisible in the lively city of Texas. The first nights were terrifying, cold, lonely, and full of fear that I would not survive. It was frightening when I saw more and more people in the same situation as mine. In Texas, there are more than 28,000 homeless people like me, an increase of 12% since the year 2020. In Austin, the number reaches about 3,200 people, up 18% in the past 3 years. Houston has more than 4,000 people sleeping on the streets every night, an increase of 15% since 2022. These numbers are not just dry statistics. They are broken lives and dreams buried under the sidewalks of Texas. So what made me end up living like this? Before we go on, tell me, have you ever thought that just one small mistake could push someone out onto the streets of Texas? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And now, let us go back to the first days when everything began to collapse. I was born and raised in a small town in Texas, where dry grass fields stretched endlessly under the harsh sun, and life seemed to revolve around repetitive days. My house was at the end of a dusty dirt road, an old wooden house with a rusty metal roof, where my father often sat on an armchair with a whiskey bottle lying nearby, and my mother was busy being indifferent to everything around her. My childhood had no memories of laughter or warm hugs. Instead, it was full of scars, both on my body and in my soul. From a young age, I was used to my father's beatings. If I dropped a bowl, forgot to clean the floor, or simply appeared at the wrong time, he would yell, "Call me useless," and leave bruises on my arms. My mother never stepped in. She just looked at me with empty eyes as if I were a burden not worth caring about. I learned to bow my head, keep silent, and try to be invisible in my own home. But the worst happened when I was 15. An acquaintance of my father, a middle-aged man with a sleazy smile, took advantage when I was alone in the storage shed. He raped me, and when I tried to tell my father, he just sneered and said, "You brought it on yourself." That pain was like a knife cutting deep into my heart, destroying all my trust in people. I never told anyone again for fear of being mocked or abandoned once more. I began turning to drugs to forget. Heroin and meth became my only friends, the things that blurred the terrible memories. The first time I tried, a man in town took me to a corner behind a bar. "Roll up your sleeve, it will help you forget the pain," he said. I obeyed, and just seconds later, a pleasant feeling spread through me, as if all the pain disappeared. I slept well for the first time in years, but the price was addiction. According to the Texas Department of Health, in the year 2025, 38% of homeless people here are addicted to substances, and I was one of them. Drugs did not save me. They only dragged me deeper into the darkness. Even so, I still tried. I went to school even though my mind was always clouded by drugs. I dreamed of escaping that town, of getting a decent job in Houston or Austin where the skyscrapers shone like promises of a better life. I worked as a waitress in a small diner, saving every penny to buy a bus ticket to leave. But life in Texas was not easy. At that time, rent in Houston or Austin was skyrocketing, with a small apartment in Austin costing up to $2,000 a month, while the minimum wage was only $7.25 an hour, unchanged for more than a decade. I worked hard, but the money I earned was only enough to buy drugs, not enough for rent or proper meals. At 18, I decided to run away from home. I packed a few clothes, some savings, and got on a bus to Houston, thinking the big city would give me a new chance. But I was wrong. Without skills, without a degree, and carrying an addiction, I was quickly fired from temporary jobs. I worked as a waitress, a cleaner, but every time there was a drug test, I lost the job. Debts piled up, from rent for a motel room to money borrowed from friends, and soon I could not pay for the room. The landlord kicked me out of the shabby place on the outskirts of Houston, and I had nowhere to go. I still remember the feeling of standing in the middle of the street, a small backpack on my shoulder, watching the traffic pass by, not knowing how I would survive. Texas society, with the bright lights of Houston, seemed to have no place for a girl like me. In the first days in Houston, I tried to apply for jobs at restaurants and supermarkets, but no one would hire a girl who looked lost, wearing old clothes and with messy hair. I began wandering, sleeping on park benches or in hidden corners behind buildings. I felt like society had turned its back on me. One time, a middle-aged man at a bus station stared at me, then tossed a coin toward me and said, "Take this and buy something to eat, poor thing." I wanted to shout that I was not a beggar, that I only needed a chance, but I had learned that in Texas, the homeless like me were seen as invisible, or worse, as a burden. I was not lazy. I once had dreams, worked hard, and hoped for a better life. But life had beaten me down, and society seemed unwilling to give me the chance to stand up again. The scars from childhood, the addiction, and the indifference of the world had pushed me into a dark corner I never thought I would fall into. And then, on a pouring night in Houston, everything collapsed, completely marking the day I officially became a homeless person on the streets of Texas. Have you ever thought that just one mistake, one incident could make you lose everything? Tell me in the comments because my story is about to enter its darkest chapter. On that pouring night in Houston, I truly became homeless. I stood huddled under the awning of a closed convenience store, my backpack soaked and clutched tightly to my chest, listening to the rain beating down on the cracked sidewalk like the sound of a fatal drum. No home, no money, no friends, only me. And the craving for heroin screaming inside my body. That was the moment I realized Texas, with its shining skyscrapers in Houston, was not a dream, but a brutal battlefield, where more than 4,000 people like me sleep on the streets each night. Homeless life is not only about lacking a house, it is about losing dignity, hope, and even yourself. In the early days of being homeless, I slept wherever I could on the benches in Herman Park, under bridges in the Buffalo Bayou area, or in hidden corners behind restaurants downtown. Each night was a survival challenge. I remember the freezing winds blowing through my makeshift tent, making me shiver even though I was wrapped tightly in a torn blanket. The smell of garbage from nearby bins where I searched for leftover food filled every breath. One time I found half a burger behind a fast food restaurant in Austin. It was cold and slightly moldy, but I swallowed it quickly, trying not to think about the bitter taste, because it was my only meal that day. A staff member saw me and shouted, "Do not go through our trash thief." I ran away, tears mixing with the rain, wondering why life could be so cruel. Street life in Texas was a chaotic spiral. In Austin, where the number of homeless has reached around 3,200 in the past 3 years, I saw unforgettable scenes. Along 6th Street, tattered tents sprang up like mushrooms covered with cardboard and plastic. Some people openly injected drugs in broad daylight, their eyes empty, lost in the haze of heroin or meth. Most of the homeless here were addicted to drugs, and I was part of that number. I injected heroin in dark alleys in Houston, the brief pleasure soothing the pain, but afterward came deeper emptiness. I did not choose this path. It was the only escape when there was nothing left to hold on to. But addiction was not the worst thing. The more terrifying thing was exploitation. In Texas, 25% of homeless women have experienced exploitation. I saw young girls just like me forced to trade their bodies for a meal, a place to sleep, or a dose of drugs. One time in Dallas, a middle-aged man approached me in a parking lot and made an offer. "Give me 1 hour, I will give you $20 and a hot meal." I refused, my heart pounding, but the hunger and cold almost made me falter. Moments like that stripped away dignity and made me feel like I was no longer human. Texas society seemed not to care. I was kicked out of a park in Houston for sleeping illegally, with police shining flashlights in my face in the middle of the night and yelling, "Move along, you cannot stay here." I wanted to scream that I had nowhere to go, but they did not listen. One time in Austin, I asked to use the restroom at a cafe, but the staff shook their head and said, "For customers only." Meanwhile, another person who looked more decent was allowed in right away. People passing by looked at me as if I were a criminal. A mother in Dallas pulled her child away quickly, saying, "Do not look, they are dangerous." I wanted to cry to explain that I was not dangerous, just hungry and tired. But in Texas, the homeless like me were seen as garbage invisible in the busy streets. Fear was always there. I was once hit with a soda can by a group of young men in Houston while I was sleeping, and they mocked "Trash wake up." I ran away, my heart racing, afraid of being attacked. Dangers like that happened often, theft, harassment, or running into drunk men in dark alleys. I learned to sleep in hidden corners, clutching my backpack like a shield, but no night passed without me wondering if I would survive until morning. Many homeless people in Texas live on the streets for more than a year, facing harsh weather, the burning summer sun, or the cold winter rain without any safe shelter. The inner conflict wore me down even more. I blamed myself. If I had not run away from home, if I had not gotten addicted, maybe I would have had a different life. I felt like a ghost, invisible among the shiny skyscrapers of Houston. I once thought I was strong, but now I was just an 18-year-old girl, broken, scared, and alone. There were nights when I sat under a bridge in Dallas, looking at the distant lights, wondering why I deserved this life. My faith in people and society had been gone for a long time. The impact of homelessness did not just stop with me. It affected the whole Texas community. Tourism, a major economic driver, was also affected when visitors hesitated at the sight of tents and trash. Families walking through downtown Austin often covered their children's eyes, unsure how to explain the sight of people huddled on the streets. It created division as if we, the homeless, were the enemies of society. But not everyone turned away. I met people like James, a 45-year-old veteran in Houston who had been homeless for 2 years. "I served the country, but now I am forgotten," he said, his eyes full of tears. James told me about his days struggling with drugs, but he still tried to enroll in a job training program to find a second chance. Or Maria, 28 years old in Dallas, working 2 jobs but still losing her home because she could not pay rent. "I save every penny to buy a bus ticket to visit my family," she said. "They are the reason I fight." Stories like those of James and Maria reminded me that even in despair there were still strong people. I also tried to fight, but I failed again and again. I attempted to quit drugs at a free rehab center in Austin, but only a few weeks later I relapsed because of the pressure of street life. I applied for jobs, but no one would hire a girl with dark circles under her eyes and torn clothes. There was a shortage of affordable housing, and very few homeless people in Texas could access mental health services, and I was not among them. I felt trapped in a vicious circle with no way out. Then, one day, in Houston, a small ray of hope appeared. I met a community outreach worker from the Coalition for the Homeless Houston. She did not look at me like I was beneath her. She handed me a bottle of water, a blanket, and said, "You deserve to live better." For the first time in years, I felt seen as a human being. That was the turning point, the first light in the hell of Texas street life. Have you ever thought that one small act from a stranger could change an entire life? Share your thoughts in the comments. That was the first light in the hell of cracked sidewalks, freezing nights, and hungry days. From that moment, I began the journey of recovery, not only to save myself, but also to bring hope to others who were lost in the heart of Texas. The journey to quit drugs was the biggest challenge. I was taken to a free rehabilitation center in Houston, supported by the Coalition for the Homeless Houston. In the first days, I trembled, broke into cold sweats, and my body screamed for the next dose of heroin. There were moments when I wanted to give up, to run back to the familiar alleys in Austin for that brief relief. But the staff member Sarah was always there, holding my hand, saying, "You are stronger than this, Emily. Do not let drugs define you." She told me about her own life. She had once been homeless in Dallas, had been addicted, but overcame it. She said that very few homeless people addicted to drugs in Texas had access to rehab programs, and I was lucky to be one of them. After 3 months, I made it through staying sober for the first time, even though the nightmares of the past still haunted me. Alongside quitting drugs, I began to learn a trade. The center introduced me to a training program of the Texas Homeless Network in Houston, where I learned to cook and manage a community kitchen. I remember my first day in the kitchen, my hands shaking as I chopped vegetables, the smell of bean soup filling the air, so different from the smell of garbage bins I used to search through. Every dish I made was a small step to regain dignity. I was not only learning to cook, I was learning to trust myself and my ability to rebuild my life. I began volunteering at a charity kitchen in Houston, serving meals to homeless people like I once was. Seeing them hold a hot bowl of soup and smile in gratitude warmed my heart. According to local reports, programs like this in Houston helped more than 1,000 homeless people access temporary housing or jobs in the year 2024. I was part of that change. New relationships gave me strength. I met Lisa, a 40-year-old woman in downtown Houston who had also once been homeless and addicted. Lisa shared her story. Losing her home because she could not pay rent had turned her into a homeless person. We became best friends attending group therapy sessions run by Path Texas, where I learned to face the trauma of childhood abuse. Lisa liked to joke, "Emily, we are street warriors. Nothing can knock us down." She was my light, my new family. I also met David, a 35-year-old volunteer at the kitchen, who had once lived in a homeless camp in Dallas. He never judged, always listened, and helped me believe that I deserved to be loved. Our relationship was not romantic love, but a deep friendship, like a lifeline in the Texas storm. Success came slowly but clearly. After 1 year, I moved from being a volunteer to becoming a full-time staff member at the charity kitchen in Houston. I started going online sharing my story and the stories of people like James, Maria, and Lisa. The channel quickly attracted thousands of followers, not only in Texas but across the United States. But the past was not easy to let go. One day, while I was arranging food at the Houston kitchen, a man walked in. I recognized him immediately, the man who had raped me when I was 15. Now he looked old and weak, coming in to ask for a free meal. He did not recognize me, but that same sleazy look in his eyes still made me tremble. He said, "Young lady, give me some soup, I am so hungry." My heart pounded and painful memories rushed back. I stood there in the warm kitchen and had to choose forgive or turn away. I took a deep breath, handed him the bowl of soup and said, "This is the last thing you will ever get from me. Do not ever show your face to me again." He lowered his head and left, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I did not forgive him for his sake. I did it for myself, to free myself from the past. I also faced my family. My mother called, apologized for being indifferent, and asked me to come back to the small town, but I refused. "I have built a new life in Houston," I said. "I do not need pity, I need to live." That was the first time I truly felt strong, no longer the frightened girl I once was. Texas, with the streets that were once hell, had now become the place where I found strength. Have you ever had to face the past to move forward? Share your story in the comments, because mine is about to reach the ending where I turn pain into purpose. Today I stand here at the age of 24 in Houston, Texas. No longer the invisible girl huddled under a bridge or digging through trash to survive. I am Emily, a volunteer at a charity kitchen, and above all, a woman who has turned pain into a mission. From the darkest days on the streets of Texas, where I once thought I would never escape, I have found light not only for myself, but also for thousands of people struggling on the cracked sidewalks of Houston, Austin, and Dallas. This is not just my story. It is proof that no matter how many times life knocks you down, you can still get up stronger than ever. My current life is proof of resilience. I live in a small apartment in Houston, not luxurious, but it is a place I call home, something that 6 years ago I thought was impossible. Every day I wake up, make a cup of coffee, and go to the charity kitchen, where I serve hot meals to the homeless just as I once was. I share my story. James is the veteran in Houston, Maria's the mother in Dallas, and Lisa's the friend who walked through the darkness with me. Every video and every talk is my way of giving back to the community that saved me. I advocate for affordable housing because Texas is still short by 666,000 units for low-income people, according to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition in 2025. I call for more mental health programs, since only 35% of the homeless in Texas can access these services, and I spread hope so that no one feels invisible. The biggest lesson I have learned from this journey is that homelessness is not the end. It is a painful chapter that can lead you to rebirth. I have learned that even if society turns its back, even if the past weighs you down, you can still find light if you do not give up. A bottle of water, a kind word from Sarah, an opportunity from the Coalition for the Homeless Houston, those things changed my life. And I believe such opportunities can change the lives of thousands of others. We must act now. Texas needs more temporary shelters, mobile health care,